The abortion process is really bizarre, and I want to share with you what's going on. And I want to share with you in some detail because I believe concealment of abortion procedures has greatly contributed to the acceptance of abortion in this country. It's done behind closed doors. They make it glamorous. They make it sound good. It's not a big deal. You just go in and have a little procedure and you're okay. So I want you to know what really happens. And if this upsets you, good. We need to be upset. The movie The Silent Scream, which showed an abortion in the womb, was very controversial and generated much emotion because it visually demonstrated the results of an abortion on an 11-week-old girl. You know that the doctor who performed the abortion couldn't bear to watch the film to the end. He rushed out of the room before it was over and never performed another abortion again. Because you can see in that movie the child is recoiling, trying to get away from the instrument coming after. You can see this opening its mouth in a scream. That doctor had performed thousands of abortions, but since he saw that movie, he never performed another one. I think those who know what happens in an abortion find it very difficult to condone the practice. And the method used depends on the age of the preborn, although more than one method sometimes is necessary. The following abortion methods are used regularly in the United States. Saline abortions are no longer performed in our country. RU 486, suction aspiration, D&C or dilation and curettage, dilation and evacuation, DNX, dilation and extraction, prostaglandin. Let's look at RU 486. It's a chemical rather than a surgical abortion. It's performed up to 49 days of gestation. RU 48 requires at least 3 visits to the doctor's office or clinic. On the first visit, the woman is given a physical exam and administered mifepristone. See, RU 46 blocks the action of progesterone, the natural hormone vital to maintaining the lining of the uterus. So the embryo starves as the nutrient lining disintegrates. A second visit, 36 to 48 hours later, the woman is given a dose of artificial prostaglandins, usually misoprostol, which initiates uterine contractions and usually causes the embryo to be expelled from the uterus. Most women abort during the 4-hour waiting period, but about 30% abort as many as 5 days later at home, at work, wherever they are. A third visit about 2 weeks later determines whether the abortion has occurred and if a surgical abortion is necessary to complete the procedure. Then we have suction aspiration. That's the most common abortion method typically performed when the child is 6 to 12 weeks old, but can be used up to 16 weeks. The cervix is dilated and a hollow plastic tube with a sharp tip is inserted into the cervix, then into the uterus. And an aspirator with almost 25 times the force of a household vacuum cleaner attached to the tube tears the body of the fetus apart and suctions pieces through the tube. In any abortion, if the infant's head is too large to come through the suction tube, the abortionist inserts forceps into the uterus. He uses these to grab the free-floating head, which he then crushes to small enough size to fit into the suction tube. Then it too is removed. D&C is performed when the fetus is 6 to 12 weeks. The cervix is opened using an osmotic dilator. Then a curette, a thin metal rod with a knife, very sharp loop at the end, is inserted into the uterus. The curette is used to dismember the child. After this, a cannula, which is a hollow plastic tube attached to a suction aspirator, is inserted to remove the child, placenta, and uterine lining. These are captured by a stockinette attached to the end of the suction tube. To avoid the risk of infection or hemorrhaging, the contents of the stockinette are examined to be sure that all the parts of the child have been removed. D&E is performed in the second trimester, 12 to 24 weeks. It's usually a 2 to 3 day procedure. At this stage of pregnancy, the child's tendons, muscles, and bones are more developed. The cervix is closed more tightly and must be dilated enough to remove the larger child. To aid in cervix dilation, laminaria, which is dry seaweed sticks, is inserted into the cervix. The dilation process can take 1 to 2 days depending on the size of the child. Once the cervix is sufficiently dilated, the laminaria are removed. Forceps are inserted into the uterus to forcibly dismember the child. The skull is then crushed and removed. A suction aspirator is then introduced to remove any remaining parts of the child, the placenta, and the uterine lining. DNX, also known as partial birth abortion, is used in the late second and third trimesters, 24 to 36 weeks. As with the D&E, the cervix must be dilated using laminaria. Then forceps are then introduced into the uterus to grasp the baby's legs. The baby is delivered breech while the head remains inside the birth canal. Using blunt-tipped surgical scissors, the base of the skull is pierced and a suction catheter is inserted to extract the brain. This causes the skull to collapse and the dead baby is then fully delivered. Now sometimes while the child is partially delivered and still alive, the organs are removed and sold for fetal tissue experimentation. That's an illegal practice, by the way, but it still happens. Prostaglandin, or live birth abortion, is done in the second or third trimesters. Prostaglandin are naturally occurring chemical compounds which assist the birthing process. For the abortion procedure, artificial prostaglandins are injected into the amniotic sac, which induces violent labor and leads to the birth of a child usually too young to survive. Often salt or other toxin is first injected to ensure that the baby will be delivered dead. Since some babies have survived the trauma of a prostaglandin abortion and been born alive, those children are usually set aside and just left to die. Abortionist Dr. William Rashbaum, a faculty member at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, told the New York Times that abortion is the destruction of life, and noted that for some time he was beset and troubled by pictures of the child resisting his attempts to abort it. Holding on to the womb, he said, for dear life.